Hey guys, you're watching ARCHITYPE Game Dev, and in this tutorial we're gonna continue where we left off. So I'm gonna delete these, and I'm gonna delete these, and we're gonna create our first function. But before we do that, I just wanted to tell you, in Blueprint you have events and you have functions. Difference is that events can have timeline, while functions cannot have timeline. So in this case, in C++ case, there are only functions, or some people call it as methods because they are part of a class, but it's actually the same thing. So let's declare our first function. We'll say void myfunc when we will put these brackets and then semicolon. So we declared it, but we did not define it in CPP. We don't have that function defined here. So we will hover over it, and it says function definition of myfunc not found. We can press this show potential fixes and create definition. Now it will automatically create in CPP. You can see these brackets, and we can press enter, and our function is created. You can see this void, then name of the function, then brackets. What does this mean? This void means output. So you can see we have in our function output. Void means that it's empty. It doesn't return anything. So you write down as void, it means it doesn't have any kinds of outputs. If brackets are empty, that means that it doesn't have any kind of inputs. So myfunc is function without output and without any kind of inputs. So let's make an example of this by using some kind of inputs and outputs. So let's make this example. We have inputs of integer, float, and outputs of boolean, only boolean. So in this case we will say bool myfunc2, and in brackets we put inputs. Inputs are integer or float. We will say int32, and we will say, I don't know, myint, and we will say float myfloat. Okay, let's put semicolons. So as I told you before, you can see that myfunc, okay, we go over this and we will create definition. Okay, it created definition, and you can see we have definition of it. So let's get back to it. As I told you before, we have name of the functions, we have this is return type, or in Blueprint output, and these in brackets are inputs. As you can see, inputs. Okay, so in this case, in C++ you can have only one return type. You can only have one. So either it can be void, or I don't know, we can have int32. Doesn't really matter. But you can have only one return type. It's not like in Blueprint when you can have multiple. There's actually a way in C++ to have more than one through the references, but we will talk about it later, and it's not a really good practice. If you can avoid it, avoid it. But in this case, just learn that you can have only one return type and you can have multiple inputs. So I'll make another example. Let's say it doesn't have any kind of output. It has input of bool and input of, I'll say, I don't know, some kind of string, just to have string. Okay, let's compile and go here, and we will say, so it doesn't have any kind of output. So in this case it will be void myfunc3 in brackets. Does it have inputs? Yes, boolean and string. We'll say bool some bool, and we will say f string. For strings we use f string in C++ to know that it's a string. Okay, so pretty much that's it about creating functions. We will create one just to show you some things. Okay, so let's make this function. It will be called addition, and it will add first input and second input and return the result of that addition. So we have inputs of 2 integers and 1 output, which is integer. In this case we will delete all of this, and we will delete all of this, so we will not need them. And we will say, so we have int32, that's output. We'll say addition, and in brackets we'll say int32 first, then int32 second, and put semicolon. Okay, and wait for Visual Studio to give us a hint. Okay, then go show that create definition. Okay, our definition is completed. So as you can see, we have this return, and we will say, we will delete this, and we will say first plus second and semicolon. We finish it with semicolon, so it will return this int32 will actually be return of this addition. In C++, it's more common to create function like this for the same thing. We have local variable, so it's variable inside of the function. It's not, doesn't have to do with class variable. And that local variable, we say to put it as addition of first and second, and then get that local variable, return it. So let's do that in C++. In that case, we will say int32 sum. So we created our local variable, and we will say sum equals to first plus second semicolon, and we will say return sum with semicolon. So you remember that we did this in .h file. We do it in .h if it's a part of a class, but this is local. This is inside of a function, so we define it inside of our function. So as you can see, these brackets after the name of the function. So this is actually empty, and then we assign it. When we put sum equals to this, it's the same thing as, for example, to set sum to the addition of these two. So sum is equal first plus second, and even this is more straightforward than in Blueprint, and then return sum. So we don't have any kind of get or set, just say equals, that is set, and when we call it, it actually returns that sum. So let's call our addition at BeginPlay as I did here. So addition has A and B as inputs. A is 5 and B is 10, and the result is set to C. Okay, so let's go to our .h file, and we'll first define int32 of A, which is equal to 5, then int32 as B, which is equal to 10, and then int32 of C, which is actually empty, because we will set it to addition. So we will go to our BeginPlay, and between these curly braces, after BeginPlay, we will say addition and open up the brackets. As you can see, it needs two inputs, int32, which is first and second, so we will say A, comma B. Those are inputs, and semicolon. So as we talked before, it's not the same in Blueprint. In Blueprint you set it afterwards, but in C++ you set it as equal. As I told you, C is equal, then you put function addition of these two. So as you can see, this returns int32. You can see that is a return type, and it needs int32 and int32 as inputs. So whatever this is, it has to be the same. The same variable has to be equal to that function. So let's make purposely error, because I want to explain what I was talking about. For example, let's say that this is string. Okay, change variable type, and you can see that result cannot be set to string because its return type is actually integer. So let's say that this C is actually f string. Okay, so if we go to our CPP file, you will see when it loads, okay, no operator equals matches this operand, so f string cannot be equal to int32. So our function returns int32. You cannot set this C to be equal to this function because it is not of the same type. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I will return it to int32. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll talk about functions in later tutorials. For now, just remember how you create functions, how you can create local variable in function, and you can return it, and how can you make these class variables, and how you can put some class variables to be equal to some kind of result of this function. And in the next tutorial we'll finally make something which you can actually see in Unreal Engine.